A very happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody, and welcome to this session on the role of Japan in Indian Ocean security. My name is Brendan Taylor. I'm the head of the Strategic and Defence Studies Centre here at the ANU, working very closely with Rory Metcalf and the team, and congratulations to Rory and the team for putting on such a wonderful event. We're going to be looking at the role of Japan in Indian Ocean security this morning, covering four questions in particular. Firstly, what are Japan's security interests in the Indian Ocean, including energy security? What are the options for involving Japan and other external powers in regional arrangements related to Indian Ocean security? What partnerships, what security partnerships is Japan developing in relation to Indian Ocean security? And last but not least, what contributions can Japan make to Indian Ocean security? We're joined by a very distinguished panel to address us on these subjects, starting off with Mr. Nishi, the former Vice Minister of Defence for Japan. Mr. Nishi, it's a real honour to have you here on this panel this morning. Followed by old friend and colleague, Dr. David Brewster from the National Security College, Commander Yushigarata from the Japanese Command and Staff College, and another old friend, Dr. Anthony Bergen, the Deputy Director of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Each of our speakers will speak for, as with yesterday, for 10 to 12 minutes this morning, leaving plenty of time for questions and discussion. Just a reminder that today's session is on the record. So without further ado, I'll invite Mr. Nishi to the podium to address you this morning. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Nishi.
Well, thank you very much. My speech is rather a short one, but try to cover the all topics that was indicated on this paper. So the Indian Ocean has been the important route for various types of trade all through history. It was the route between China and the Middle East countries, as well as India, for trade in ancient days, and was named the Silk Road at Sea. The trade through the route went far to Europe. Even today, it is the important route of trade of various issues. For example, it is the important route to transport crude oil to Japan, China, and other Asian countries today from oil-rich Middle East countries. Japan still heavily relies on Middle East countries for crude oil supplies, in spite of experiences of oil crises twice in the past time. Even the Arab Spring did not change the importance of this route. The safety of the route is therefore vital for Asian countries in various ways. Japan, for example, has deployed destroyers and P-3s in Djibouti for the anti-piracy operation in the Middle East for the safety of trade in the region. Though the numbers of assault of pirates declined dramatically recently, however, Japan is going to maintain the deployment for the safety of the maritime transport. Would there be any possibility of the Indian Ocean route losing its importance? If it happens, what would be the most serious conditions changing the meaning of the region? There would be two conditions that might change meaning of the route. First, the development of a new route through the Antarctic is under serious study. If the route is to be commercialized, this will be a shorter route between Europe and Northeast Asian countries than the route through the Indian Ocean. It should be noted that the ASEAN market may not enjoy the advantage of this Antarctic route. Adding that, there will be cost issue that should be considered. Second, due to the production of shale oil, the United States is now able to export crude oil again. Japan will benefit from this new source of crude oil, and this could reduce her dependence on the Middle East. It should be noted, however, again, that Japan will probably continue relying on crude oil from the Middle East to a certain extent. The route would never be meaningless. Each conditions is not sufficient to decrease the importance of the Indian Ocean. The combination of these conditions might shift Japan's security concern in the future to a certain extent if it happens. However, we still have to pay, under the current situation, serious attention to the importance of the Indian Ocean for the Japanese security. This invites us to consider how to maintain the current secure status of the Indian Ocean. India has been the predominant power in the Indian Ocean. However, there are growing factors changing the security environment of the region. Pakistan's nuclear capability, Muslim fundamental movements as Taliban and IS, China's growing presence in the Indian Ocean, and the recent nuclear agreement with Iran. I am most interested in China's movement. The Sino-Indian border issue has been unsettled for many years, and the most recent conflict happened in 2013. The more important issue is the growing presence of Chinese Navy in the Indian Ocean. There are occasional port visits of PLA Navy ships to Pakistan, including a type of ships AS, a ship supporting the operation of submarines. This indicates the possibility of PLA Navy submarines operating in the Indian Ocean. Submarines are a delicate issue for assessing the threat factor at sea. Anti-submarine warfare capability requires serious investment of money as well as human resources and training programs. It consists of submarines, surface ships, and anti-submarine airplanes and helicopters. It also requires technological advancement and skills of personnel. Japan has developed this capacity since the days of the Imperial Navy. Though there was a time we suspended the effort after the Second World War, we started the effort again after establishing the Maritime Self-Defense Force about half a century ago. The recent Japanese initiative of capacity building, transferring software of underwater medicine to the Vietnam Navy, is an indication of important first steps of Japan's commitment to the regional security environment. The bilateral military cooperation between Japan and India is still limited. However, Japan's participation to the Malabar exercise is a first important step towards that end, together with the Indian participation to the Japanese Fleet Review in 2015. The bilateral talks concerning the sales of US-2, the flying boat, will be the next important bilateral security issue between India and Japan. Japan herself currently faces a difficult situation in the East China Sea. The Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Forces has about 50 destroyers. However, almost half of the on-operation ships are tied to the East China Sea. There are so many objects for the ISR operation in the East China Sea, and most of them are PLA Navy ships. Chinese declaration of air defense identification area in East China Sea is another important issue of security concern. Japan perceives that China would like to control the sky in the announced area, almost like its sovereign area. You have to note that the concept of the ADIA is a bit different from the ADIZ, Air Defense Identification Zone, which the United States, Japan, and other countries declared already about half a century ago. The long corridor of navigation from Japan to the Middle East is very important for the Japanese security now, and its significance would never decrease its meaning in the future. The concept of Indo-Pacific covers the whole area that is essential for the Japanese prosperity. Australia is the center of the Indo-Pacific concept, and India is the dominant power in the Indian Ocean. Japan has already started her cooperation with these countries for maintaining the peaceful status of this long corridor, and would have more occasion to cooperate with India in future. the development of bilateral relations between Australia and Japan as a good and meaningful guidance for enhancing India-Japan relations, exchange of people, mutual visit of units of services, concluding bilateral agreement of ACSA, Acquisition Cross-Service Agreement, and GSOMIA, that is about the agreement of the security of the secret information. There is still a lot that Japan can do for the security and safety of the Indian Ocean. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Ambassador Kusaka spoke yesterday morning about Japan's growing concerns about Indian Ocean security. But indeed, until recently, the Indian Ocean was not really part of Japan's security agenda. For the last 70 years, Japan's security horizons have really not extended too far past Singapore, even if they extended that far. In essence, Japan has largely left its interests in the Indian Ocean to be protected by the US Navy. And while the US Navy remains the predominant security provider in the Indian Ocean and will continue to be so for the foreseeable future, that approach of entirely relying on the United States is really no longer sustainable. The United States has made it clear that it is looking for its allies and friends to play a much more active maritime security role right across the Indo-Pacific, and that inevitably includes Japan. Now, yesterday, Ambassador Kusaka and today, Mr. Nishi emphasised the importance of Japan's growing relationship with India as a way of safeguarding Japan's strategic interests in the Indian Ocean. And we've also heard a number of times at this conference how Japan and Australia can work together right across the Indo-Pacific. Well, this morning I want to explore some important roles that Japan could play in Indian Ocean security, either alone or in partnership with countries like India and Australia. But first of all, the fundamental question is, well, why should Japan be interested in Indian Ocean security? And this is why. This is the view of the Indo-Pacific SLOCs from Japan, and obviously and rightly so, Japan's key interests or most immediate interests are in the East China Sea and South China Sea. But I should also note that even though those sort of the fat SLOCs that you see in yellow going through the South China Sea are of most immediate importance, the red lines are actually significantly more vulnerable because they point to actually the concentration of shipping. So as these images like this graphically show, Japan's SLOCs, Indo-Pacific SLOCs, do not magically end at Singapore. And as we've been talking about, one of the primary themes of this conference is that you cannot place maritime security in the Indo-Pacific in neat little boxes. There is an interdependency right across the littoral. And that means that a country like Japan has to be an active player in security right across that littoral in one way or another. Now, as most of us know, Japan has been an active contributor to the international fight against piracy in the Western Indian Ocean since 2009, and that's included ongoing deployments of at least 2 Japanese destroyers. But now concerns about Somali piracy are receding, and it's time, in my view, for Japan to develop a much more comprehensive strategy in relation to the Indian Ocean. And in my view, key objectives of Japan should include increasing its influence within the region, hedging its position through creating at least some nascent security presence, and just as importantly, providing support for the development of a regional rules-based order, and that's a real weakness in the Indian Ocean. So I would like to focus on 4 key areas in which I see India as potentially playing a greater role in the Indian Ocean. One is greater engagement, or continuing its trajectory of engagement with certain countries in the Bay of Bengal area. Secondly, supporting emerging regional institutions. Thirdly, maritime capacity building with poorer Indian Ocean island states. And then I'll just say a few words about the special role of the Japanese Coast Guard could play in all of this. And I should particularly note that all of these things could be, all of these areas could be pushed forward by Japan in partnership with regional partners, or sometimes alone. So I'll start to talk about these areas in order. So in my view, of any of the sub-regions of the Indian Ocean, Japan quite possibly has the most interests and can play the most effective role in South Asia and the Bay of Bengal. And as I mentioned, we've already heard a lot of comments about Japan's growing relationship with India, but in my view, Japan can and should play a major stabilising role with other countries in the Bay of Bengal area, such as Myanmar, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. Yesterday, Admiral Akimoto identified the Bay of Bengal as a key strategic area for Japan, and his main point was really as a hedge against a blockage of commercial shipping across the South China Sea. Japan should be preparing at least for the potential of the rerouting of shipping routes across the Indian Eastern Ocean through the Indonesian archipelago and then outside of the First Island chain, if there was some contingency where the areas inside the First Island chain were denied access. I agree with that view, but I think I would also take a broader view that Japan can play a very effective regional stabilisation role in the Bay of Bengal, and in fact it's already doing so. The Japanese aid agency JICA is really playing a very significant role in Myanmar. It's also playing a leading role in terms of developing port infrastructure in Bangladesh, and I suspect that we're going to be seeing Japan playing a much more active role in Sri Lanka in years to come. So that's my first suggestion. The second area is support for emerging regional institutions. Now, one of the major strategic weaknesses in the Indian Ocean is its weak institutions. Although we have groupings such as the Indian Ocean Rim Association and the naval grouping, Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, they remain very weak and very underfunded. and a lack of regional institutions, lack of a regional identity undermines the ability or capability of Indian Ocean states to work with each other to either provide maritime security themselves or, just as importantly, speak with some sort of regional voice towards the major extra-regional powers. And these weaknesses only increase the risk of strategic instability in the region, particularly as we are seeing changes in the balance of power in the Indian Ocean in the coming years as the relative predominance of the US Navy falls, and some countries are even considering the scenario of a wholesale US naval withdrawal from the Persian Gulf. I think we have to see that as a real possibility, perhaps less likely than more likely, but nevertheless a real possibility at some time in the future as US dependence on imported oil falls and as the the United States suffers its own political instability. So Japan, what can Japan do? Japan is already an observer to IORA and IONS, but frankly it does not play an active role in either organisation. And I believe that Japan could play a much more active role in those organisations and other Indian Ocean regional institutions, whether it be financially or just being there and being an active contributor to the discussion. Japan's reputation among Indian Ocean states is seen in very benign terms. It's seen as a very positive regional player and has very little or no historical baggage in the region. I'm suggesting that Japan should use that reputation and resources to help build Indian Ocean as a more cohesive region. My third area suggestion is maritime capacity building among some of the poorer states in the region, particularly the Indian Ocean island states, which tend to be very poor, have very few capabilities and have huge EEZs to manage and exploit. Now, there's a vast range of potential ways in which Japan could involve itself with these countries, basically in the area of helping these countries exploit their blue economy and properly manage and govern their areas of jurisdiction, of maritime jurisdiction. Now, one potential area is in fishing. Many Indian Ocean island states suffer from the effects of illegal or unregulated fishing in their EEZs, and in fact, I think I would suggest that for most of these island states, they would see that as their number one security problem. In my view, Japan could play an important role in raising its profile in helping to defend their fish stocks in the Indian Ocean from being preyed upon by unscrupulous fishers, particularly from outside the region. Finally, I'd like just to have a few comments about the Japanese Coast Guard. Now, the Japanese Coast Guard really has a key role to play in being at the forefront of Japan's engagement right across the region, and we're seeing that currently in the South China Sea in terms of Japan working with countries to improve their Coast Guard capabilities. And the Japanese Coast Guard could play a similar role with selected countries in the Indian Ocean. We've seen the Japanese Coast Guard exercising with the Indian Coast Guard on an annual basis around the Bay of Bengal area for, I think, 12 or 13 years. So the Japanese Coast Guard certainly has the reach, and it's really probably or certainly the most highly capable Coast Guard right across the Indo-Pacific region. So I would suggest that the Japanese Coast Guard should play a leading role in all of this. So I'll finish with my key takeaways. First of all, in my view, Japan must pay a lot more attention to developing a comprehensive Indian Ocean strategy with the objective of becoming one of the key extra-regional players in the Indian Ocean. For those who argue that there is a danger of strategic overreach by Japan being active in the Indian Ocean, I would argue that quite correctly Japan has a focus on its immediate areas of East China Sea, South China Sea, but it simply cannot afford not to be an important player in the Indian Ocean. Countries like Australia, which has a relatively small navy, has long experience in extending our strategic reach right from the Korean Peninsula in Northeast Asia to the Gulf of Aden. And Australia well knows that one needs to leverage limited assets in the best way possible through husbanding naval assets when possible, and using financial resources, training, and various other forms of security engagement. I would suggest that Japan needs to do a lot more thinking about how it can leverage its strategic reach as well. So my key suggestions are providing maritime security capabilities and infrastructure to countries like Myanmar, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. We've seen engagement with Myanmar, Bangladesh. Sri Lanka is a key country that Japan, I think, can play a very active role with. Supporting emerging regional institutions to help build a regional identity, a regional voice and regional capacities in providing maritime security. Capacity building among the smaller Indian Ocean states in selected areas. And finally, the key role of the Japanese Coast Guard and the importance of trying to use white hulls in providing maritime security right across the Indo-Pacific. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Commander Shirota from Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force Command and Staff College. And I also PhD candidate at National Graduate Institute of Policy Studies in Roppongi. And last February, I at last passed the comprehensive examination. And principally, I have to concentrate my developing my dissertation. But I failed to escape from the boss's order and captured and sent to the Canberra 2 days ago. Of course, I can receive the very good inspiration and stimulation through this conference. So anyway, I want to express my sincere gratitude for my invitation, such a distinguished conference for the Professor Metcalf, Dr. Brewster, and all members of the National Security College and National Australian University and the Japanese Embassy. Thank you. So now, I move to my discussion, and my conclusion is very clear and simple. You can see. So, Indian Ocean is a vitally important highway, but strategical overextension for the perpetual permanent commitment. That was my conclusion. And many of my presentations, I think that overlapping so with the Vice Minister Nishida and Dr. Brewster, but I'm sorry, but I'll continue. And this is my discussion on the counter-piracy operation. So the Japanese counter-piracy operation has started from March 2009. And the 2 destroyers, the 2 P3C, as a quasi-permanent deployment in the surrounding the Indian Ocean. So at first, so after the 9/11, Japanese JMSDF deployed the support forces for the coalition force on the anti-terrorism war, and for the almost all the time since the 21st century beginning, the JMSDF almost always so deploying the surface fleets, surface forces surrounding the Indian Ocean. So I now assess that this the impact of the deploying the surface forces and the P3Cs. So if we deploy the surface vessels in the fast seas, and we imagine estimate that low intensive environment, not so high intensive, not so counter piracy. That was a peacetime or low intensive situation. So in this situation, so the ships should require that the helicopter capable and the sufficient payload, the provision of water, fuels, etc. And C4 infrastructure such as tactical data link and satellite communication, and etc. So now JMSDF possesses about 41 destroyers, including Aegis and helicopter carrier, and 6 more small frigates. But only 26 of them are appropriate when considering these requirements. And the 26 is that these ones, so please confirm that the JM156 ones, something. So, and usually surface ships regularly maintenance and repairing. So due to repair and maintenance, around 20 of them, 80% of 26 vessels, so surrounding 20, around 20 are in service at the same time. And 6 of them, 6 of 20, so approximately about 30% of the active destroyers are placed under dispersion. This is a very severe burden for the Japanese JMSDF surface fleet. So, of course, that the present deployment forces 2 destroyers, but in transit 2, and more the preparation for the deployment of the 2. That I think that all over time, the 6 destroyers are occupied for this counter-piracy operation. So this is also from the website of Cabinet Secretary. The distance between the Gulf of Aden and Japan is about 6,500 nautical miles. And it takes over 3 weeks, maybe the 23 or 24 days at 12 knots. So in the midway, there are no permanent bases to provide replenishment or repairing, etc. That's all. So, and yesterday, some of you argued about China's one belt, one road concept. So I think that the China's situation is almost the same. Okay, so I think that this concept should be discussed on a political or economic issue, principally. So sometimes this issue comes to be a security issue, but it is almost impossible to overcome the military vulnerability in this region, okay? So, in wrap up this, my argument from now, so James, this DSP, called the DSP, Deployment Surface Force Piracy Enforcement, can conduct ad hoc missions on the way to and from the Gulf of Aden. For example, the humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, or by multilateral exercise as active suasion or political presence or show the flag. This is it's enabled. But it is almost unrealistic to expand forces which work full-time missions in far seas around the Indian Ocean. So, because the FDF asset always conducting strategic ISR in the surrounding Japanese territorial water and East China Sea, and missile defense or some other various missions. So this phrase is from Paul Kennedy's Rise and Fall of British Naval Mastery. So Paul Kennedy referred from this phrase by Basil Henry Rizal Hart. So the too much burden obligation invited strategical overextension. That is the same situation for not only the Royal Navy, but JMSDF. Now, so by considering our capability and limitation, not only United States, but also Japan expects much to India as Dr. Brewster mentioned, the predominant security provider. So I think that only India as a regional power can control the Indian Ocean theater. And potentially, US Navy can deploy the self-conclusive carrier strike group. Only US Navy can deploy and conduct a high-intensive conventional war in the far seas. And no other navies can such an operation. Of course, we can conduct low-intensive or peacetime activities. But only US forces can conduct a high-intensive conventional force conflict in the far United States. So, okay, so then I swing back to the Japanese security context surrounding Japan. So these three phrases are referred from the Asia-Pacific Maritime Security Strategy published in last year from the US Department of Defense. So this is the context of the maritime domain surrounding Japan. So this is the A, the safeguard the freedom of the sea, and B, deter conflict and coercion. C, promote adherence to international law and standards. This is, I think, that the very specific items, so explaining the strategic context surrounding Japan. And now, I think, in my opinion, so I think about the direct impact to high priority for Japan's strategy. At once, so this is a core assumption is involved. In the multipolar world, I think that the nuclear deterrence is still effects as in the Cold War era. And next, so I think we have to think about the deterrence and the high-intensive conventional war. So such as the anti-access area denial strategy. And the United States, our alliance, is, maintains a very simple military strategy in the world. So that is called the offensive strategy based on forward deployment and power projection capabilities such as a carrier strike group, expeditionary strike group. So, and to maintain this power projection capability, US brushing up the air-sea battle, or what we call the JAM-GC, or the third offset strategy, and blah, blah, blah. So, but this is the alliance's general direction. So, we have to deal with the counter-SAD strategy, and Japan should establish Japan's area denial strategy to secure the basis of power projection capability of US forces. This is my key concept of the counter-SAD strategy for the Japanese military strategy. Okay, so and then but current world, the trend is low-level territorial disputes in the East China Sea and South China Sea. This is a trend phenomena, but this is very difficult to deter. I remember that in this situation, so it was similar situation was occurred in the Cold War era. In the Cold War era, static nuclear deterrence is effect. Under such as escalation ladder level, so regional conflict was, and regional conflict level or high-intensive conventional wars often occurred. So, such as the Korean Peninsula or Vietnam or Afghanistan, etc. So this is called the stability-instability paradox proposed by Glenn Snyder in 1960s. So, and applied to the current situation, this Snyder's argument. So it's if the deterrence is effect in the high conventional war level, so the low-intensive territorial dispute be difficult to deter. This is my understanding of the current security environment of the surrounding Japan. So, and as I mentioned, the counter-HAD strategy and Japan's area denial strategy, etc. But in the highly sophisticated area denial capability, so the useful asset under the HAD environment is low visibility or underwater, such as a submarine, UAV or UUV or stealth aircraft answer. So the showy surface combatant ship or showy carrier vessel, aircraft carrier cannot survive under the high intensive threat in the HAD environment. So of course, Indian Ocean is very important. So we have to commit and show the flag and appeal the presence. But such assets, surface combatant ship, cannot utilize in the homeland defense in the surrounding Japan. This is a very controversial situation. This is my understanding. Okay? So I want to wrap up my argument by ends with means structure. So to enhancing the Indian Ocean, Japanese role in the Indian Ocean, so maintaining open and stable sea. This is the phrase from the national security strategy from Japan. And that situation is fitted as SLOC. And securing freedom of the seas. And these situations principally provided by the India and potentially the US forces. And so the ways is three phrases. Japan-US alliance is the cornerstone of the security in the Indo-Pacific region. But I think that the resources not sufficient. So we want to enhancing relationship between India, Indian Ocean, and Australia in the Western Pacific. So, and more, including friends and allies, what we call like-minded countries in this region. This is the way. And means. And once at first we want to make effort for self-help, so utilizing resources efficiently, appearing maritime superiority outside the HAD environment by surface or air assets, and for example, the shore actions such as freedom navigation operation in the outside the HAD environment. But we should be conscious of cost imposition. So we appeal that we have very many friends and allies, like-minded countries in the world, in this region. So this appeal indirectly contribute to the Japan's homeland defense. This is a very important way of thinking. And plus, so friends and allies, so capacity building in some of ASEAN countries and some of South Asia countries. So already Bursa mentioned that I think that Sri Lanka or Bangladesh is a very important key of the commitment. And of course, Japan has a historical issue surrounding countries, so such as China, Korea, and ASEAN countries. And also, India is a regional power and has historical issues surrounding countries, so such as South Asian countries. So there are rooms to coordinate between how Japan can contribute such countries' capacity building. So this is one of the important means of developing the Japanese role. Also, I think that for concluding my argument, in the 18th century, between 18th century to the mid of the 20th century, a great game played within the European major powers. But in the 21st century, this is the first time for human being history, so the very global powers, global power, great game occurred again by global powers, global non-European countries. So such a situation, so I think Japan have to be active and to be active by and strategically. This is my conclusion of my presentation. Thank you so much.
Good morning, and thank you, Rory Metcalf and the Security College, and also to the Japanese Embassy for the invitation. I'll focus my remarks on the question that was given of what contribution Japan can make to broad Indian Ocean security, and some of my comments complement David Brewster's remarks, but I think I've got some fresh points to make. I think the Indian Ocean has enormous potential for harnessing blue economy resources. Fisheries, offshore oil and gas, marine-based tourism, maritime industries are all making a significant contribution to the economies of the Indian Ocean states. I think the blue economy concept has the potential to act as a key catalyst for sustainable development and indeed political stability through the Indo-Pacific. Many of the Indian Ocean Rim countries are, as David said, looking to how to consider how to seize opportunities from the blue economy sector for higher growth. Now, Julie Bishop launched the concept of the blue economy in Perth in 2014 at the IORA, the Indian Ocean Rim Association meeting in Perth. And of course, Japan, as we've heard, is a key dialogue partner in IORA. There's some confusion sometimes, I think, about the blue economy concept. It's not just the traditional maritime industries like fisheries, shipping in ports, but it also includes areas such as aquaculture, renewable energy technologies like wind, wave and tidal, bioproducts, carbon sequestration and desalination. The oceans are likely to become an economic force this century. That'll be driven by key technologies that make it economically viable to tap marine resources, and indeed demographic trends that are fueling the demand for food security and alternative sources of minerals and energy. By 2030, two out of every 3 fish on our plates will be farmed, much of it from the sea. Offshore wind capacity is forecast to rise tenfold by 2030. There'll be a surge in investment in coastal infrastructure, industry and tourism as we see global migration to coasts, cities and coasts. The blue economy idea is all about the sustainable development of the Indian Ocean, and indeed that concept is now enshrined in the IORA Economic Declaration. I believe Japan, like Australia, shares the vision for growth in the Indian Ocean region, and both countries wish to make blue economic activity a key driver for Indian Ocean Rim countries. Japan wishes to promote prosperity and stability in the Indian Ocean and seeks to achieve that through maritime security and safety. Of course, Japan here has real expertise and demonstrated its contribution to ensuring freedom of navigation through its contributions to improving navigational safety in the Straits of Malacca. So the blue economy, I think, is really part of a larger trajectory of stronger regional cooperation, where Japan can play a very useful role for the collective benefit of the Indian Ocean by growing the region's economic potential, whilst at the same time safeguarding the health of the ocean itself. This broad goal requires key expertise, deep expertise in marine scientific research, and that's one of Japan's great strengths. So let me just, in my remaining time, give you 5 examples where I believe Japan can provide, through its ocean industry expertise, great support for developing the blue economy in the Indian Ocean. First, the Indian Ocean states are looking at alternative non-conventional renewable sources of energy. And here it's offshore solar power that's attracting significant interest. Now, it so happens that Japan has one of the world's largest offshore solar energy projects. I've been there in Kagoshima City. It's expected to supply something like power to 22,000 households in Kagoshima. Second, while there's been no commercial developments to date, there is still interest in deep seabed mining in the Indian Ocean. Now, Japan is what's called a pioneer investor under the Law of the Sea Convention for deep seabed extraction of manganese nodules. Japan has registered mine sites in the Indian Ocean, and I think Japan can assist Indian Ocean countries if and when that sector comes on stream. There's also now global interest in the development of deep-water gas hydrate energy reserves, and it's here that Japan is truly at the international leading edge. India and Japan last year carried out a joint survey for gas hydrates using a Japanese drilling ship in the Indian Ocean. Prime Minister Modi has now listed work on gas hydrates among the top 10 potential areas of research for India, given his country's dependence on imported fossil fuels. The Japanese Agency for Marine Earth Sciences and Technology can, I believe, offer great assistance to Indian Ocean rim countries in the field of ocean sciences. Third area is research and development in marine biotechnology. That also is emerging as a promising sector of growth in the Indian Ocean. Out of the total of 677 international claims between 1991 and 2009 of marine gene patents, 90% of those patents are held by just 10 countries. Japan comes in at third place. So again, this is another area I think Japan can work with Indian Ocean countries to realise some of the economic benefits. The fourth area, which I would like to spend just more than a minute on, is aquaculture. Aquaculture is a key driver for the blue economy in the Indian Ocean, providing food, nutrition and employment opportunities. Now, David mentioned capture fisheries, but capture fisheries in the Indian Ocean is significant, as he referred to, overfishing. So the challenges, I think, of food security can be addressed through sustained aquaculture production. It's the fastest growing food production system at 7.5% a year growth over the last 20 years. By 2030, aquaculture is going to make up around 65% of fish protein. If aquaculture practices can be refined through technology, it'll go a long way towards lessening the impact, as David pointed out, of illegal, unregulated and unreported fishing, and so help sustainable ocean resources in the Indian Ocean. A regional approach to skills and technology will be important, I believe, to foster aquaculture. Now, Japan has tremendous skills in this industry, tremendous skills. It has enormous expertise in developing high-volume feed that doesn't require on wild fishing inputs. It's got great skill in market demand for farm fish through pricing, nutritional content and availability. And while you might think it is an unusual topic, let me just refer to the fact that, and you can go to Dr. Google, there's tons of articles on seaweed as the new superfood. Japan is, of course, leading the world in the development and marketing of seaweed. Now, look, let's be honest, most people aren't going to want to eat a lot of seaweed unless it's secured around our sushi. And I'm not sure most of us would how to prepare seaweed even if we were given it. But I do think that Japan, apart from the technology challenges, I think Japan has an enormous ability to guide Indian Ocean countries on the marketing, on the cultural, if you like, the cultural challenges involved in the harvesting of sea vegetables like seaweed and kelp. The final area, let me just note, is the digital blue economy. I think we're all increasingly aware of the growing importance of the network of submarine cables that provide us with internet and phone access, etc., etc. And that's a key area of development too in the Indian Ocean. Developing the digital economy through the development of submarine cables. Japan is one of the world's leading providers of undersea cable subsystems. So that's another area I think Japan can offer. So in summary, I guess my argument is that I think the Indian Ocean countries are realising the importance of the oceans for economic development. And I think Japan, I've picked 5 areas, but there are others where I think Japan, by sharing its ocean industry expertise, its skills, its technologies, can make a very significant contribution to ocean development. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our presenters for those wonderful presentations. We've got about 15 minutes before the morning tea break, so I suggest we just take a very quick round of 4 to 5 questions and then give the remainder of the time to our presenters 1 or 2 minutes each to respond. So just up the back.
Hitoshi Nasu from ANU College of Law. So it seems that David was suggesting that Japan should be taking a more active role in Indian Ocean security, but Mr. Shirogata basically pointed out that realistically it'd be difficult for the Japanese self-defense force to play that role, perhaps at least in the near future. Whereas Anthony was suggesting that there are perhaps otherwise Japan can contribute to the Indian Ocean security. So I was wondering what might be your view, Mr. Nishi, in terms of Japan's future contribution to Indian Ocean security.
We have a second question.
In the Indian Ocean, I'm wondering if there's a useful role that Australian facilities can play, or are we just too far south or not suited in some way, whether we're talking about Darwin or whether we're talking about Perth. And I'm thinking here not just about regular usage of those facilities, but also were there to be a crisis in, say, the South China Sea, would it be of value to Japan to have recourse to those facilities, particularly if it was difficult getting back home? Thank you.
Rory Medcalf, Head of National Security College, and it's a real pleasure to see such a distinguished panel on this session. And Brendan, thank you for moderating this. It's another sign of partnership between SDSC and NSC. My question, I guess, is to all of the panellists, but particularly to the Japanese panellist, to Mr. Nishi and also to Commander Ushirogata, which is about Djibouti and about the Japanese presence there. Do you call it a base? Do you call it a facility? Do you call it access? What I'd be interested if each of you could explain what you see as the principal mission of that presence, and what potential do you see for that presence to expand, and why? Thank you.
I think we'll probably have one more question, because there's a lot there. We could probably convene another panel on these very good questions, but just one more question up there.
Marina Tsurbis from the National Security College as well. Apologies. I was particularly struck by the excellence of the 4 presentations. Thank you very much. And my question is to Anthony Bergen. I wanted to thank you for helping us to focus on the positives, given that we've had so many presentations about security risks, but you are focusing on the opportunities. What I wanted to ask you is, what circumstances do you think would need to exist for countries regionally in the Indo-Pacific region to collaborate in a very constructive way to harvest some of those benefits that you've been talking about?
Perhaps given that question was addressed to you, Anthony, we'll give you a first go at response.
Look, I concur with, I think it was David that said that in the Indian Ocean the institutions are pretty weak. You know, the Indian Ocean Rim Association is now making strides. I mean, India chaired it, Australia, now Indonesia, South Africa's the vice chair. So it has had and will continue over the next 4 years to have very strong leadership. So I think IORA certainly does have potential to develop some of these areas, and as I said, the blue economy concept is enshrined in their declaration. But look, I guess what needs to happen is obviously a regional approach to develop the ocean economy, and I think that does come back to David's point. We need to think about ways to strengthen those regional institutions. And here, I would definitely argue that Japan has a much bigger role to play as a dialogue partner in IORA. I have visited Mauritius twice and spoken to the Secretary General of IORA. He has personally told me he would welcome a bigger role for the dialogue partners in the association's work. Dr. Rifki Munna, I don't know, Rifki's still here? Yes, he and I are in a group called the Indian Ocean Rim Academic Group. So there's no reason why Japan couldn't join as a dialogue partner our academic group to develop some of the concepts that we've heard this morning. So I think there are ways that we can work with, and at the moment the only pan-Indian Ocean body is IORA. So I think that would be my focus, to try and work to strengthen the IORA framework.
Thanks, Anthony. David, did you want to respond to any of the questions?
Yeah, I'll just respond to one question about the sharing of facilities, and I would focus less on port facilities, more on air-based facilities, and in particular I would see the importance of creating a shared maritime domain awareness covering both the Bay of Bengal and South China Sea region, and certainly there's a lot of scope for countries like Japan, Australia, India and the United States to be working together in trying to develop a regional maritime domain awareness system that could very well include cooperation and use of facilities in countries like the Philippines, Singapore, Andaman Islands and even the Cocos Islands. So that's one sort of suggestion in that front.
Okay, now I will respond to the strategic importance of the person Darwin and the focus Metcalf's question. So at first, several years ago, so the U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton mentioned that pivot, Asia pivot. So I think that if we think about the center of gravity in the East Asia, so I think that Japan or Ryukyu Island chain is a very strategic importance, choke point. But if we change the eye point to the Indian Ocean and the Indo-Pacific surrounding the Malacca Strait or South Asia. So I think that also western coast of Australia is strategic importance. I agree with you. So, and second, so the importance and the presence of Djibouti. In my understanding, I don't know the long-term estimation about how Japanese government think about maintaining the Djibouti base or not. But in my understanding, the Djibouti base is very far away from Japan and no infrastructure, as I explained in the midway of the Indian Ocean. That was a very large and huge traffic, but no infrastructure. So I think that this Djibouti base can maintain, and the presence of or stable presence of the India or U.S. forces, military forces, and the stable situation, so we can maintain the Djibouti. So this is a very, very tentative existence. This is my understanding of Djibouti bases. Okay. So,
Commander Ushirogata asked me the homework about the Djibouti status. The important point is, yes, it is very far from Japan, but at the same time, this is a very important area for the Japanese contribution for the anti-piracy. Basically, we have two fronts of the anti-piracy operations, one in the Middle East and one near the Malacca Straits. And the Malacca Straits area is the responsibility or the role of the Coast Guard side. We have a very good division of labor between the MSDF and the Coast Guard. The Djibouti is the MSDF's responsibility. And Commander Ushirogata pointed out, it's very far and it's not easy to communicate there. Logistics line is very long. But that is going to give us a good opportunity and challenges to develop relations with Indian Oceans, particularly India, to have more relations and military relations. We have some increasing numbers of port visits to the Indian side and also the logistical support from the Indian Navy. Adding that, we have occasions of visiting Gulf states in various ways, and it's a very huge occasion for us to exchange experiences and also the closer contact with the American Fifth Fleet. The piracy situation in the Middle East is decreasing. It's like a cat and mouse type of competition. If we are going to decrease our presence there, the numbers of piracy is going to grow up. That is the experience we had in the past. So we are going to commit. And actually there exists the controversy inside of the cabinet, inside of the governing party, whether we should maintain it or not. But I think, and from the Minister of Defense's viewpoint, I think that is a position that we are going to keep for future. It is the necessary occasion for us of the logistical challenge, operational challenge, also the contribution of the multinational coordination of navies. And that is going to give us another opportunity to pay more attention that what kind of capacity building efforts we should extend beyond the ASEAN countries in order to give the very good infrastructure or future long distance deployment. And that is another challenge. So there will be a lot of challenges that we are going to face, and that is quite meaningful for the Japanese security policy for the future. That's what I think now. Thank you.
That brings us right to 10 past 11, so thank you very much, Mr. Nishi, and to all of the other panellists, and thank you once again to the Embassy of Japan and to Rory, not only for this particular event, but as you say, another opportunity for cooperation. Join with me in very warmly thanking all of the panellists for their wonderful contributions this morning.